Honorable Member for Castries for Vieux South. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. The only problem, Mr. Speaker, of course, is that you would have closed the debate without the closing remarks coming from the member for Miku South. But usually it is under the rules. Usually it is under the rules. Mr. Speaker, I think today there will be some individuals in this House who are exceedingly happy, who are very, very happy. For one thing, the member for Miku South would be exceedingly happy because he is now fulfilling one of his major ambitions, a major dream. Unequal, I suspect, would be the pleasure and joy and happiness of the member for Castries Southeast. As one of the principal architects behind the first episode of the reconstruction of Hewanorra International Airport, he now has a second bite of the cherry, another opportunity. And nothing, I guess, pleases a member more than the satisfaction, Mr. Speaker, that a goal, objective, a plan of a sitting government is realized or is being realized. Of course, the member for Ancillary Canneries is euphoric. And I'm sorry I'm missing him because I wanted to see his reaction while I'm saying this, you know, the benign pleasure that I derive from seeing his reaction. But other persons too would be happy. The associated consultants who are in line to receive these monumental consultancy fees, etc., for this airport. And critically and crucially, the management hierarchy, or the majority of the management and hierarchy of SLASPA would be elated. Now, we have a habit in this House that for political reasons, sometimes we don't like to speak the truth. But uncomfortable as the truth may be, there are times we need to speak that truth, even if, of course, inconvenience is the order of the day. No question, because there were members in senior positions in SLASPA who were steadfastly opposed to the proposal by the former government to allow for a PPP arrangement for the airport. So they would be elated because they too share the philosophy that they must be given the opportunity to handle the resources, handle the benefits for the St. Lucia Airport and Seaports Authority. So they would be elated. So, Mr. Speaker, at long last, we see the birth of the idea. At long last, we see that a government in opposition who had fiercely opposed the PPP arrangement now has the opportunity and to prove their proposal right. Because for months, for years, that has been the sole argument that the airport must be reconstructed by the government of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, for me, it's a matter of regret that we do not have Hansard with us and updated copies of Hansard. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, what is happening at your department, but we are missing updated copies of Hansard. And I say so because this afternoon might have given me an opportunity to reflect on some statements that have been made in Hansard from time to time. I've heard a lot of economic heresy in this House. But some of it, I think, we take in jest in lighter moments. Member for Castries Southeast, I think, one suggested that the reason why the economy grew by 2 or 3% is because you reduced VAT by 2.5%. But I think everybody understood that was a Freudian slip of sorts and didn't take it seriously. But I've been in this House, I've heard the member for Miku South say in clear and open terms that the philosophy is that once you create a revenue stream to pay for the investment, No. A revenue stream to pay for the investment or pay for the project, it has no impact on that. And that was said, I believe, at that last meeting, if the leader of the opposition is also confirming that he heard what I heard. To be frank, I was astounded, I was shocked, because this is supposed to be the guru in economics. And I don't pretend to be an economist. I still treat myself as a lawyer, teacher and lawyer. I never go and say I'm an economist. But then, today is a living refutation of that philosophy. Because when the airport was first touted as a project by this government, the member for Migo South extolled the idea of the lockbox arrangement and said there'll be no need for a guarantee. That's why I needed Hansard, Mr. Speaker. That's why I needed Hansard. There will be no need for a guarantee because we'll have a lockbox arrangement. The lockbox arrangement will pay for any loan or for any debt. Today, what do we see? We see in the House that you have a lockbox arrangement in place, ostensibly for the airport revenue. And then, second element, we now come into this House to ask for a guarantee for SLASPA. Now, I just want to reflect a little bit on two aspects of this. The first thing is SLASPA itself. I don't have updated figures over SLASPA's financial performance. I do not. I believe there is something that is recent. But I'll say this. When I served in the former government, there were some agencies that flatly, some banks and agencies that flatly refused to approve any loans for SLASPA. I'm fully aware, for example, that SLASPA had to close down its account at a particular foreign bank because of the refusal of that bank to allow SLASPA to continue making use of the financial arrangements with that bank. The Agence Française de Développement, Mr. Speaker, together with the then government, fashioned a project to deal with the sewage problem in Castries. It's no secret that we have a ticking time bomb in the Castries Basin. It's a very, very serious matter. Sewage, of course, finds its way into that basin on a daily basis. And the former government had entered into negotiations, completed negotiations, for a treatment facility to be constructed at some point at Vieux Point. This government decided that that really was not a good site, but that's not the point. That is not the point. Agence Française de Développement refused to approve a loan for SLASPA. And when the government protested because of the historical relationship with the French, Agence Française de Développement, Mr. Speaker, decided that it would make the money available to the Caribbean Development Bank, and the Caribbean Development Bank will then unlend to St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, and government of St. Lucia would provide the guarantee. I think we demitted office at that point, but my memory cannot be 100% accurate of the chain of events. But I make those points. That in going into this arrangement, obviously our eyes have to be wide open. And very clearly, a judgment call will have to be made on SLASPA's financial competence, its ability to manage this loan, and that there are no issues regarding its future sustainability. So certainly, if we had had those financial statements, I think, that would have been very helpful as we consider all of these factors. Where it would have led to eventually is highly debatable, but my point is that in any request for a loan to guarantee a loan for SLASPA, although it is a contingent liability on the state, Parliament needed to have had an updated statement on the financial competence, financial ability, financial sustainability of SLASPA. We have not had that. All of us assume that SLASPA is in the greatest financial health and that the lockbox arrangement, which we now see does require a guarantee, is in place. Of course, SLASPA may have had its own reasons why it has approached the government to approach Parliament for a guarantee, maybe because its act says so, but it could also be the case that SLASPA knows full well that you go into a loan of this magnitude and you're going to rely on a lockbox arrangement, there will be legal problems down the road. So that's resolved. So, Mr. Speaker, here we have a situation where we are told that the revenue stream for SLASPA will pay for the investment, the project. There'll be no impact on debt. But I didn't hear him. I may have missed it fully. But this morning, we saw a dramatic reversal of that position when the member for Micoud South admits that the debt to GDP ratio will rise as a direct result of this investment. So there was a reversal. What astonished me, Mr. Speaker, this morning was that the honorable members from Micoud South tells the House there will be no impact on the revenue of the government of St. Lucia. I don't know what that means. I mean, there will be no impact on the revenue of the government of St. Lucia. The current arrangements, or the arrangements until recently regarding the payment of airport tax, and I know that the member for Castries knows that very well, meant that part of the revenue raised for the airport taxes as a whole, part of that revenue had to go to the state. Now, you may want to argue it's called airport development tax and therefore it's a new tax separate and apart. But the reality is that the state will be denied access to an important stream of revenue by these arrangements. But we have 20 years. The proof of the eating is in the pudding. Mr. Speaker, I find it alarming that honorable members in this House can extol the fact that this project will be for the benefit of all the people in the South. We are in charge. We are in charge. And it sounds nice to tell people we are in charge. We are delivering on promises that we run things. But Mr. Speaker, we have a duty to this country as well. We have a duty to this country to tell the country what are the implications for them in the future, given the magnitude of this loan. I do not recall if it is, as a member for Castries South says, the largest loan that the House has approved. I don't remember, to be precise. But there is no question that it is a massive loan, bearing in mind that is not the only loan that we are dealing with. Now, Mr. Speaker, when you are compelled to come to Parliament to get a guarantee for a loan, all of us in this House know it impacts on our debt to GDP ratio. It accumulates our debt figures. How then can you tell the people of St. Lucia that this will have no effect for the future. It is all well and good for members in this House to ridicule the past. I hear the ridicule all the time. You are Minister of Finance, 000. You're the worst Minister of Finance that St. Lucia has ever seen. And mind you, it is the Lilliputian in the House who says that, you know. The Lilliputian in the House who says that, you know. But you know, Mr. Speaker, I lived through a very difficult period in the last couple of years. I will never ever forget that we reached a point in this country when, and it wasn't long into the period after we had assumed office, that St. Lucia found itself in a very difficult situation, and I say not long after we assumed office, that there were loans maturing on the horizon and it was not in a position to pay these loans. I will never forget that we received a memorandum from the then Ministry of Finance laying out the options of the situation, and the straight advice from the Ministry of Finance at the time was, you have to go to the IMF and undertake a restructuring of the St. Lucian economy to save the St. Lucian economy. I organized, Mr. Speaker, for many nights, for many, many nights. In the end, I decided that I will not go down in history as taking St. Lucia to the IMF. I will fight it. That's what he's ridiculing. Those sacrifices. That's what he's ridiculing. And I was fortunate enough, Mr. Speaker, at the time, to be able to secure the support of the government in Trinidad and Tobago for a loan of $40 million to help tide us over that period of that payment. Mr. Speaker, my simple point is this. There comes a time when, given the nature of the debt that you have, you may find yourself facing difficulties to actually pay that debt. It could be that your debt to GDP ratio is not outrageous, say like Jamaica, or say like even Grenada, it's at 85% or 90%. But if you do not have raw resources, and if you're going to end up having to borrow to pay previous debt, then you get into difficulty, because that was the fundamental difficulty that we faced. So when we say that we are delivering on promises at any cost, it doesn't matter that we're in charge. The sovereign reality is that even if at the end of the day you might be able to meet your commitments to your lockbox, and that assumes everything is equal. As somebody said this morning, that you have no hurricanes. God forbid. You have no earthquakes. I mean, God forbid. There's no major downturn in your economy. Of course, we're now beginning to feel the full impact of Brexit with the numbers in our tourism plant, our hotel plant. We're now beginning to feel it, and it's going to get worse. Do you have a compendium of all of these factors to take into consideration as you look at this situation for the future? So, Mr. Speaker, this notion that somehow St. Lucians must not be worried about this or be consumed in this is, in my view, utter foolishness, utter madness. Because someday soon, when you see the difficulties arise, then they wouldn't be there. Yes, well, they wouldn't be there, but the reality is going to be the people of St. Lucia to face the music. No growth that is engineered solely on the basis of loans survives. And I understand that you all had the Prime Minister of Grenada here for what? For the convention. He came down on a private jet too. He was boasting of the private jet. Oh, I didn't know all of that. That's interesting. But anyhow, he is one of the principal architects of an economy.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order.
What is the point of order, Prince?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is misleading the House. Mr. Speaker, he suggested that the tourism industry is beginning to feel the effects of Brexit. And I would, he said we're beginning to feel the effects of Brexit, and therefore it's going to get worse. Those are his words, and I quote him. But Mr. Speaker, as minister with direct responsibility for that industry, I take that rather personal. And I want to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that we have the right record laid in the Parliament. But the reports that we've received from the St. Lucia Tourism Authority suggest that we are growing well in the UK. In fact, Mr. Speaker, year-to-date October 2018, we're at 3.1% up in the UK market. So if the member has supporting evidence to suggest that Brexit is actually affecting our performance in the UK, I would like him to do so. Thank you so very much.
You may continue.
Ask me to proceed because he doesn't understand the term in futuro, in the future. So. Anyhow, well, it is, there are signs, yes, now, but the effect is certainly coming. You can turn, you can twist, that's going to be the reality. Now, Mr. Speaker, I was on the point that no economic growth based on borrowing will ensure economic survival. You will pay for it in the end. And I was given the example of the current regime in Grenada when the Prime Minister in his former life borrowed heavily to drive growth in Grenada. And whereas the other islands were struggling at 2%, 1%, 3%, he was 6%, 5%, 4%. When you went to the ECCB meetings, everybody wondering how Grenada, and what was he doing? Borrowing money to set up factories for call centers, left, right, and center in Grenada, employing people, and the bottom came out. Well, it smacks of Ojo Labs. That's the reality. But he's not the only one. The same thing happened in Antigua. The identical thing happened in Antigua. So when you see we are very busy accumulating debt at the rate that we are, and I, for one, understand that any government has to borrow, but the issue always being what is responsible borrowing. And the issue for the opposition is this. This is an act of recklessness. That is what it is. To be adding between 5 and 10 points to your existing debt ratio. Mr. Speaker, there's another dimension that intrigues me in this matter. And I notice we have not touched it. I believe my colleagues gave a very clinical analysis of the implications of this loan. It is the foreign policy dimension. And of course, there was an interesting exchange this morning as to whether the Export-Import Bank that is mentioned in the resolution before the House is an independent entity or it is an independent entity with special relationship with the state of the Republic of China, Taiwan. Fortunately, Mr. Speaker, I've had some experience dealing with the Taiwanese and the Export-Import Bank because, honorable members, you remember that the former government borrowed $20 million for the St. Jude Hospital. But this is unprecedented. The government of Taiwan, Republic of China, Taiwan, decides to make a loan of $150 million US. Never before in the history of St. Lucia that the government of Taiwan has lent so much money to the government of St. Lucia? No. Of course, I think honorable members want to pat themselves on the back and say, well, they'll give us the usual thing. We are good negotiators. That's why we got 150 million. You are a lousy negotiator. You couldn't get more from Taiwan. But, Mr. Speaker, what are the underlying diplomatic issues? Underlying diplomatic issues regarding this loan. Why would the government of Taiwan decide to make a loan available at this time of $150 million to the government of St. Lucia, albeit through its lending arm, Export-Import Bank? Why? At a previous sitting of this House during budget time, I asked the member for Miku South to confirm or deny whether a delegation of sitting members of his parliament, of his cabinet, went to the Republic of China to negotiate a possibility that St. Lucia would terminate its ties with Taiwan and go China. Every time I say that, Mr. Speaker, and I ask you to just turn your head a little, the member for Bamuno commences to laugh. Every time I touch this, he laughs. And of course, he is followed by his colleague next to him in a few minutes later. Yes. Well, you are not in this. Not yet. I mean, I want to confirm that you are not in this. The question is, why was this trip made? Why was this trip made to the Republic of China? For what reason? You believe it is what they went with? Honourable member, can you help and enlighten me a little bit? I apologize, Mr. Speaker. I will not go there, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member has spoken. Although he'll speak later in the debate again, because there are other things to talk about. But my point, Mr. Speaker, is this. What a remarkable confluence of events. What remarkable circumstances that the government sends a delegation to Republic of China. The price was not right. They come back. There is a testy exchange with the Taiwanese for several months. Taiwanese at a loss to determine what was happening, Mr. Speaker. And that is undeniable because the Taiwanese held conversations with numerous individuals regarding the state of affairs. So there is knowledge. And then the months followed. The member of Castries South started to play golf up at Miku South. My apologies. You're too young for golf. The member from Miku South started to play golf at Cap with the Taiwanese ambassador. Well, not with the Taiwanese ambassador, though. The ice was broken with the Taiwanese ambassador. And then this loan of 150 million mushrooms. For 20 years, negotiated for 20 years. Now, it is clearly the case, Mr. Speaker, that the Republic of China on Taiwan must have made an assessment of what the future holds to say, well, listen, I'm going to give you this loan for 20 years. They must do so on the presumption that all will be well for the future. But there's a lesson too. I turn my attention to Grenada again. When you see Grenada decided to amputate its ties with the Republic of China, Taiwan, at the time, there was a significant loan. And the government of Taiwan was very angry at the decision of the government of Grenada. And the result of all of that was that Taiwan decided to sue St. Lucia, sue Grenada rather, in Washington, levied on property of the Grenadian government in the United States. And I know all of this because I was asked to intervene with the Taiwanese by the then Grenada government, which I did. I'm making a very simple point. It may sound oblique, it may sound unclear, but it is this. Understand that St. Lucia's sovereignty as a nation must never be circumscribed by any loans that it receives. Understand that. And that this country must ensure it maintains its diplomatic independence and diplomatic integrity. In all circumstances, Mr. Speaker. So when you see decisions like that are made for obvious political reasons, then very clearly one has to be very careful and be wary and make sure that the sovereignty of this country is not compromised in any way. You can see why I don't have no friends, huh? I have far better friends than you. I can assure you.
Honorable member,
That I can
for
tell you.
itself. You may now keep your focus here, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I've been doing that all afternoon. But you know, when it hurts because you see the problem is that they believe that somehow those who are watching cannot understand the dynamics of the situation. Mr. Speaker, the issue has never been, and all the speakers before me made that point, redevelopment of the airport. That has never been an issue. And even the member for Babano rehearsed his own version of the events, the history. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, that he is becoming quite adept at paraphrasing things. That having been said, Mr. Speaker, the fundamental issue here is the recklessness of this loan, for which we are going to pay a price down the road in the future, Mr. Speaker. I may not be around, Mr. Speaker. I may be long gone, Mr. Speaker, but the consequences of this loan will live with us, and the next generation, round the corner, will have to face it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.